Today, we're diving into one of the most talked about economic blocs in the world, Brics. Indonesia has formally joined Brics as a full member, further expanding the group of major emerging economies. With this decision, many at home and abroad have questioned whether Jakarta was shedding its non-alignment principle. Some are concerned that Indonesia might be seen as taking sides in a world that is increasingly polarized between one bloc led by the United States and another led by China and Russia. But what is Brics? What are the benefits and what are the challenges for Indonesia? If you want to know the answer to these questions, stick with us. We're going to break it all down. This is Think Tank with me, Shafiah Muhibat. The term BRIC, B-R-I-C, was coined back in 2001 by economist Jim O'Neill, originally identified to highlight investment opportunities in 4 countries. Then, in 2009, Brazil, Russia, India, and China held the first Leader Summit in Russia. South Africa joined the group in 2010, officially turning it into Brics. Since then, the multipolar grouping evolved diplomatically, geopolitically, and geo-economically. And now, it consists of 10 countries with the addition of Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates.
We can also see the BRICS countries, the members of the BRICS countries, as predicted by the paper, were also responding to this kind of issue by organizing themselves. So initially we can see it's a paper, but then finally they're organizing themselves by holding a summit in 2000. I think it was around 2009 in Russia. So that's why in 2009, then officially this grouping is becoming kind of the grouping, not only a paper. So that's why we see the development is quite fascinating. And in 2010, then South Africa becoming the member of the BRICS. Then the BRICS initially with the small letter of S, then becoming all the capital letters with the BRICS with the joining of the South Africa. And we also see that the progress of this kind of grouping with the inclusion of the other countries, including Egypt, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia in 2024. This has becoming, then the BRICS is no longer the BRICS, but then the BRICS Plus. And Indonesia joining the club just the beginning of this year. Then what we see from the BRICS then is the grouping of the developing countries or the emerging countries that are trying to somehow reforming the global governance that dominated by the Western kind of countries.
Each BRICS country plays a significant role in global affairs. They are all large, populous nations, and together, they represent about 40% of the global population and nearly a quarter of the world's GDP. That alone makes them an economic powerhouse. But it's not just about their size. They're also emerging economies with rapid growth potential. While the US and European economies are more mature, BRICS countries are still evolving and industrializing, which means they have a lot of untapped potential.
I'd see BRICS as, conceived of, for example, a grouping of emerging economies. So when we saw the original four, so it was Brazil, Russia, India, and China, we saw as, a coming together of emerging economies to sort of pool expertise, to sort of find a platform where they could work better with each other. And I think in 2009, obviously, it was just this very, a very small grouping. And over the years, it's become a strategic configuration of consequence, because we see, of course, there are lots of narratives that, oh, is this the alternative to G7, for example? Of course, I don't share that. I'm not in that school of thought, of course, but I do believe that it's important as a mechanism for deeper cooperation, for and a sort of alternative means of like-minded countries coming together. And I think in recent years, we see the reinvigoration of BRICS as a platform for cooperation, and it sort of reflected, or it fed off the idea that there is this momentum in global South mobilization, and of course countries like India, like China, and Brazil and South Africa as well. They saw this as a means to push for global South mobilization.
The rise of BRICS mark a shift in power away from the West and toward the emerging market. BRICS countries seek to build an alternative to what they see as the dominance of the Western viewpoint in major multilateral groupings, such as the World Bank and the Group of Seven. We see this in their push for a more multipolar world, where no single country or group dominates the global decision. The coalition is not a formal organization, but rather a loose bloc of non-Western economies that coordinate economic and diplomatic efforts around a shared globe. So how does the group function? Let's discuss further. BRICS isn't a traditional political or military alliance like NATO, but it's definitely a strategic partnership. The BRICS heads of state convene annually, with each country taking a one-year chairmanship to set priorities and host a summit. The bloc relies on consensus-based decision-making and is largely informal. It has no defining charter, secretariat, or common funds. At the summit, they discuss a range of issues like trade, development, finance, and security. They've created institutions like the New Development Bank, or NDB, aimed at funding infrastructure and development projects in emerging economies, and the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, or CRA, to provide financial stability during times of economic crisis. They're not just about boosting their own economies, but also working together to reshape the global economic order to better reflect their growing influence. For instance, the NDB provides loans to developing countries without the heavy conditions often attached by Western-dominated institutions.
It is not a formal organization. It is not like the like the UN, or it is not like the other UN bodies. Obviously, it is not formal organization. It's a forum for these grouping countries. So by having that kind of shape, then we should expect that these countries are not the organization, but it's just entities or grouping. So that's why what they are actually doing is actually trying to promote cooperation among them, obviously, and also, as I mentioned earlier, is also regarding how to reform the global governance. Especially, they want to be more reforming in terms of the global governance, especially Bretton Woods systems, that have been dominating the global political economy, as they criticize that these Bretton Woods institutions have been ignoring most of developing countries. So one of their aspires, or one of their aspirations, or what they were trying to do is trying to reform the global governance by having their own sort of like institutional kind of arrangement. So what they're trying to do is trying to reform the existing Bretton Woods institutions like World Bank, the IMF, and others. So they're trying to ensure the representative of developing countries are in the decision-making process of these global institutions. They also want to address the global challenges, in my opinion. As we can see, the world has been witnessing some of the global challenges, including what we call as the climate change, for example. So these countries under the BRICS, they're trying to pursue similar objectives in tackling or adapting or probably handling the climate change, but with the developing countries' perspectives. So if we can see from the existing global governance and institutions in tackling and also handling the global climate change, they are also accused that they're being kind of dominated by the Western kind of ideas. So that's why by being heard regarding the interests of developing countries, especially in achieving, say, for example, net zero emissions, then they also have to respect that developing countries are still having the rights for their own economic growth or economic development.
Another area where we see them flexing their muscle is geopolitics. For instance, BRICS nations have been critical of US dominance in global institutions. They've advocated for reforms in the United Nations Security Council, and they've been vocal in pushing for the de-dollarization of global trade, meaning they want to reduce the reliance on the US dollar in international transactions. While they're not completely challenging the dollar yet, they're exploring alternatives like using their own currencies for trade or even looking into a BRICS-backed currency. It's all part of their strategy to diversify the global financial system. The idea of expanding BRICS has been a growing conversation. For BRICS, bringing in more countries means more geopolitical leverage and a broader representation of the global South. The bloc could also have more economic and political diversity, helping to address a wide range of global challenges. More member countries could mean more collective resources. It could also lead to a greater trade cooperation among a wider range of countries. Of course, with any group, there's bound to be some tension. The biggest challenge is the diverse nature of the group itself, which we have seen since the group had only its original members. While they share common interests in reducing Western influence, they have very different political systems, economic priorities, and even cultural values. For example, China and India have a history of territorial disputes, and Brazil, Russia, and South Africa each have unique economic challenges. Keeping these countries aligned on key issues can be tricky.
I think in that sense, it is simply a platform for deliberation for like-minded countries to come together. But the reality is that it is still very much an amorphous organization with no structures or processes in place. And I think this is most evident because Indonesia became a partner country last year, but immediately this year it became a full member. So of course questions come up on how membership actually happens, because I am aware that there's a document that talks about membership, how that happens, how the core countries actually vote to get a member in. But of course, this was not very transparent in that sense, and this perhaps may raise questions on how membership happens in the first place. I think this is the reason as well where it might be a it might be a con in that sense to, when we talk about the pros, there's of course obviously the cons as well. And the fact that it's so amorphous, that there's the lack of processes, and the fact that, Russia actually was the chair last year, and they obviously said that, they're not going to open membership this year. They're not, membership is not on the agenda, but of course Indonesia became a member. So again, I think the amorphous nature of it is, it raises some questions, but at the same time, I think being able to observe this, being able to sort of take it slow and see where this goes is actually one of the things that Southeast Asian countries are best known for as well.
While the shared goal of global economic influence unites them, there are moments where their national interests clash. For instance, China's economic model is much more state-driven compared to India's more market-oriented approach. Those differences can sometimes slow down decision-making within BRICS. With such challenges, let's talk more about the expansion of BRICS. Indonesia became the 10th full member of BRICS groups in January 2025. Some have argued that Indonesia's decision could create a new partnership between Southeast Asia and BRICS. But others worry that President Prabowo Subianto's strong push for BRICS membership might upset the US, whose President Donald Trump has threatened to impose 100% tariffs on BRICS countries if they move away from using the US dollar. So let's lay out the pros and cons of Indonesia's decision. First, the pros. These include economic growth and investment, diversification of trade partners, enhanced global influence, strengthened regional influence, and support for infrastructure development.
The benefit, obviously, as the characteristic of the grouping, they're covering a quite comprehensive kind of partnership. They're focusing trade, investment. They're also focusing on financial cooperation, energy resources, agricultural innovation and technology. So quite diverse and quite comprehensive. Having said that, joining BRICS will give the Indonesian government also opportunity to access all those things, to access the diversifying our economic kind of targets, our economic objectives, by meaning that Indonesia can also get the access to the alternative finance for our development. As you can see that the BRICS is also having what they call as the new development bank, which can also provide the opportunity for the country like Indonesia to access the fund from this institution, in addition to the existing financial support from the World Bank, from the ADB, from the other existing financial institutions.
BRICS countries, especially China and India, are key global players with rapidly growing economies. Indonesia could benefit from increased investment, trade, and access to new markets, potentially boosting its economy. Moreover, Indonesia would gain access to a broader range of trading partners, reducing dependence on traditional partners like the US and the EU. This could help buffer the country from economic shocks in any single region. As a member of BRICS, there is a chance for Indonesia to play a more prominent role in shaping global economic and political policies. Also for the region, joining BRICS could increase Indonesia's geopolitical influence in Southeast Asia and beyond, positioning it as a key player in the broader Asia-Pacific region. Lastly, BRICS countries often collaborate on major infrastructure projects, Indonesia could benefit from financial and technical support for developing its infrastructure, which is crucial for long-term economic growth.
And this is where we see why Southeast Asian countries had the appetite to sort of look at this platform as an alternative means of cooperation as well. Because, of course, I think last year we saw Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia becoming partner countries. And then this year we saw Indonesia becoming a full member of BRICS. So what this tells me is it shows that it is not an alternative mechanism to, for example, ASEAN, because there is a dominant idea that it is. I don't believe it is. I feel that BRICS has complementarity in the vision that ASEAN has for sort of inclusive cooperation, global South mobilization, a platform to engage one another more constructively, sort of a very loose inter-regional sort of connection, because now we see, countries like Egypt joining as well, Ethiopia, UAE as well. So this is a very diverse countries from diverse regions coming together on one platform to talk about things that matter to all of them. There's also this concept of the new development bank. Of course, there's a lot of talk about reviving it, on making it fit for purpose as well. So I think in my mind, Indonesia joining in particular, it lends currency to the idea that it's not about moving away from ASEAN, but a means of bringing other organizations to engage ASEAN as well, because there are now 4 Southeast Asian countries who are dealing with ASEAN. So I think that's dealing with BRICS. So I think that's the idea. When these countries don't really have don't have membership in maybe the G7 or G20, this is an alternative to that, a place where their voice can be heard. And I think that's one of the main pros that you can say.
Now, let's lay out the cons. These include potential to creating tension with existing allies, alignment with non-democratic regimes, economic competition, and uncertain long-term benefits. Indonesia has close ties with countries like the US, Japan, and Australia. Joining BRICS could strain these relationships, especially if it leads to competing political or economic priorities. With the new dynamics in major power competition, geopolitical pressure on BRICS is likely to increase. The escalating tension between the US and both Russia and China could negatively impact other members of BRICS.
Regarding the geopolitical tension, we have to navigate carefully because we still have to be kind of friendly with our old allies or traditional partners, So we have to navigate that. And then the second thing that we also have to be aware of the fact that BRICS also has its own internal problems with the rivalry, especially between China and India. We know that they have a long decades kind of border disputes that can also affect the effectiveness of BRICS. And we also know that some of the BRICS members are being sanctioned by the Western countries. So we can see also within the BRICS, I should say that it is not as solid as we could expect. They're having their own problems. They're having their internal kind of division. They're having their own internal rivalry that we need to be aware of that kind of situation. And we can also, in my opinion, we need also to be careful that being part of the BRICS, the domination, the Chinese dominance cannot be ignored or cannot be overlooked. So that's why we have to really kind of be aware of this fact that being part of the BRICS may also put Indonesia at risk of being much more dependent towards China's policy.
BRICS includes countries like Russia and China, which have political systems and human rights records that differ significantly from Indonesia's. This could lead to domestic or international criticism for aligning with these countries. On economic competition, while Indonesia could benefit from joining BRICS, it might also face more competition, particularly from China and India, in sectors like manufacturing, exports, and resources. In the manufacturing sector, the primary competition among BRICS member countries primarily stems from China's dominant position as a manufacturing hub. China significantly outpaces other BRICS nations in manufacturing output due to its large-scale production, established infrastructure, and skilled workforce, often putting pressure on other members to compete on price. Other BRICS nations compete to attract investment and develop their own manufacturing capabilities in specific sectors, often leveraging their individual strengths like low labor costs, natural resources, or growing domestic markets.
We need to be careful in terms of our domestic reform. No matter what we do in international arena will not have any significant kind of benefit if we don't do our internal and domestic reform, because sometimes the opportunities in the global arena cannot be delivered in the optimum kind of situation when, domestically speaking, we still have some problems. We have some institutional issues. So that's why in order to make our membership at BRICS or whichever international kind of opportunities available, then we also have to remember that it has to be, we need to be done regarding the domestic reform and make it ready, because whatever the challenges outside should also be overcome and should also be responded by the domestic capacity in dealing with the dynamics in the global political context.
Lastly, while BRICS is an influential group, it's not always cohesive in its goals, and the effectiveness of BRICS as a global bloc is debated. There is a risk that Indonesia might not derive substantial long-term benefits if the group's influence wanes. In summary, Indonesia's membership in BRICS could provide economic and geopolitical benefits, but it also comes with challenges. To be more on the beneficial side, Indonesia needs to both make substantial contributions and protect its own national interest, meaning that Indonesia must push for practical, actionable goals that align with both the collective interests of BRICS and its own strategic priorities. Indonesia must position itself as a key driver of change within the group, forge deeper collaboration, and ensure that its voice remains indispensable in shaping the future of BRICS.